The kind of night where the small-town diner buzzed with noise. Families laughing, coffee being poured, the smell of burgers and fries filling the air. For most people, it was just another end to a long week. But for Jacklin, a young waitress working a double shift, it was survival. She'd been on her feet since sunrise, smiling through the exhaustion, serving everyone else before she even thought about herself. Then it happened. A customer's voice cut through the room, loud, sharp, unfair. Every head turned. The diner grew quiet. Jacklin froze, gripping her tray just a little tighter, wishing the floor would open up. And that's when a man, someone no one had noticed before, stood up. His voice was steady, but carried a force that silenced the room even more. He didn't know Jacklin. She didn't know him. But in that moment, he stepped in. What Jacklin didn't realize, what nobody realized, was that this stranger wasn't just defending her. He was about to change her life. The morning air was cool in Springfield, Illinois, as Jacklin unlocked the diner door for the breakfast shift. Most people only saw her with a smile and an apron, but away from the neon lights and chrome stools, her life carried a weight few could imagine. At just 26, she had become the backbone of her family. After losing her mother 2 years earlier, Jacklin stepped into a role she never asked for, raising her younger brother and sister while trying to keep their small apartment from slipping away. Rent was always just a few days late, the electric bill stacked with red warnings, and her wallet stretched thinner than she dared admit. She skipped meals so the kids could eat, patched old shoes instead of buying new ones, and told them bedtime stories not because she wasn't tired, but because she wanted them to feel safe. The diner was her anchor. 12-hour shifts on her feet, tips that barely added up, and customers who treated her kindness like it was part of the menu. She carried it all because she had no other choice. Yet that night, the one where the stranger spoke up for her, kept replaying in her head. She couldn't understand why it mattered so much. People watched unfair things happen every day and stayed silent. But he hadn't. His voice was steady, his presence firm, almost protective in a way she hadn't felt in years. Jacklin brushed it off, telling herself it was just one moment, nothing more. Still, when she clocked in the next morning and tied her apron, she caught herself glancing at the door, wondering if she might see him again. The thought both unsettled her and gave her strength, even if she didn't want to admit it. The diner clock ticked past 7 as Jacklin refilled coffee mugs and cleared empty plates, her body weary but her mind restless. The door creaked open, letting in a draft of autumn air, and there he was. The same man from 2 nights earlier. His entrance wasn't loud or commanding, yet Jacklin noticed instantly. He walked with calm confidence, not flashy, not demanding attention, but enough that she felt the room shift just a little. His eyes found hers for a brief second, and she looked away before quickly stepping toward the counter. He chose a booth in the corner, the same spot where trouble had sparked before, and sat down quietly. Jacklin steadied herself, picking up a menu even though she knew the diner's offerings were written across every chalkboard on the wall. She approached, her heart knocking harder than it should have, her smile practiced but not entirely steady. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded, his voice even. "Black, please." As she set the steaming cup before him, she couldn't help but wonder why he came back. Most strangers wandered in once and never returned. Yet here he was again, not speaking much, just sipping his coffee and studying the small laminated menu as if he had nowhere else to be. For the first time in weeks, Jacklin felt something shift in her routine. It wasn't romance, it wasn't fear, it was curiosity. She caught herself checking his booth between orders, noticing the way he sat upright, polite but distant, never pulling out a phone, never rushing the waitress like others did. When she returned to top off his coffee, their eyes met again. There was no smirk, no expectation, only a simple nod of thanks that left her more unsettled than any rude customer could. By closing time, she realized she hadn't even learned his name. Still, when the bell over the door jingled as he left, she knew this wouldn't be the last time she saw him. The diner was quieter than usual, the lunch rush long gone and only a few booths occupied by regulars who nursed their meals. Jacklin wiped down a counter when she noticed him again. Same booth, same calm posture, eyes scanning the room as if every detail mattered. She couldn't ignore how unusual it was. Most men like him, well-dressed yet understated, didn't come back day after day unless they were passing through town for work. Still, he carried no briefcase, no laptop, just himself and a folded newspaper. He ordered the special, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, and thanked her with that same quiet sincerity. Jacklin didn't linger, but she noticed something when she returned later with his plate. A napkin on the table, folded neatly, with a single word written in careful handwriting. "Thank you." Not scribbled like a rushed note, but written deliberately. She blinked, unsure if it was meant for her or simply his own habit. Still, the gesture made her pause. As the afternoon stretched on, Jacklin felt a subtle change. The regulars who usually teased or snapped at her were oddly patient today, almost as if the room carried a softer air. And though he spoke little, his eyes followed the interactions, almost protective without being intrusive. When the man finished his meal, he left cash on the table, more than enough to cover the bill, and gave her a nod on his way out. She stood frozen for a moment, watching the door close behind him. Jacklin told herself it was just a customer being polite, but deep down she felt there was something intentional about the way he carried himself. Not flashy, not loud, just steady, as if he wanted her to know she wasn't alone in that diner, even if no words were spoken. The neon sign above the diner flickered against the glass windows as the dinner rush poured in. Jacklin was moving from table to table, balancing trays, offering smiles even when her feet ached. She had just set down a plate of burgers when a man at the counter raised his voice. He was in his late 40s, dressed in a wrinkled work shirt, clearly worn down from his day. His frustration, though, turned quickly toward Jacklin. "I've been waiting 15 minutes. What kind of service is this?" His words were sharp, slicing through the low hum of conversations. A hush spread across the room. Jacklin swallowed, apologized, and hurried to check his order, though she knew it hadn't been that long. She placed a coffee refill beside him, her voice steady though her hands shook slightly. Instead of coming, the man leaned back, smirking loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe if you spent less time smiling at certain customers, you'd get the rest of us served." His tone carried weight, meant to humiliate. Jacklin froze. She had endured comments before, but this cut deeper, aimed directly at her. For a moment, she felt the familiar sting of being small, unseen, and easy to target. Then, a chair scraped against the floor. The quiet man in the corner booth stood. His presence wasn't forceful, but it shifted the entire mood of the room. He walked over, slow and steady, setting his newspaper down on the counter as he passed. "She's doing her job just fine," he said, his voice calm but firm, the kind that made people listen. The diner grew silent. The rude customer looked up, surprised, caught off guard by the interruption. Jacklin's eyes darted between them, her pulse quickening. This was the first time anyone had stepped in like this. The stranger didn't raise his voice, didn't match anger with anger, but his steady gaze held its own kind of authority. Every eye in the diner was on the scene now, waiting to see what would happen next. The room stayed still, the clink of silverware forgotten. The man at the counter muttered under his breath, grabbed his jacket, and stormed out, leaving his half-empty mug behind. Conversations slowly returned, but the focus had shifted. Jacklin stood there, holding her order pad, caught between relief and confusion. She whispered a soft, "Thank you," as the quiet man gave her a reassuring nod and returned to his booth. For the rest of her shift, she couldn't help but glance his way. He didn't ask for attention, didn't even look back at her much. He just sat, finishing his coffee, folding his paper, like nothing unusual had happened. Yet every time she looked at him, she felt something steady, almost protective, in the way he carried himself. Later that night, as she cleared the last of the tables, the same man walked toward the register. Jacklin expected him to settle his bill and leave, but instead, he stopped, his hand resting lightly on the counter. "Jacklin," he said, his voice calm but certain, as though her name wasn't something he had just learned but something he had always known. Her eyes widened. How did he know? Then he pulled out a small set of keys, the kind she'd only ever seen managers use. He placed them gently on the counter and looked directly at her. "I own this place." For a moment, her breath caught. She replayed everything in her head. The way he sat alone, the way he stepped in without hesitation, the authority in his voice. It all made sense now, but the realization left her speechless. He wasn't just a customer. He wasn't a passerby. He was the one person with the power to change everything about her work, her safety, her place here. The weight of that truth settled over her, heavy and electrifying. She gripped the counter to steady herself, not sure what to say, while his steady gaze told her this was only the beginning of what she was about to learn. Jacklin froze, her eyes locked on the keys resting between them. All night she had seen him as a stranger who simply chose kindness, someone who stepped in when most people would have looked the other way. But now, the truth unraveled before her eyes. He wasn't just a man in the booth, he was the owner, the one quietly watching, not to test her but to understand her. The room felt heavier, the hum of the old ceiling fan above filling the silence as her mind tried to catch up. Her voice came out soft, almost trembling. "You own this diner?" He gave a small nod, his expression steady but not cold. "I built it years ago. I step back sometimes, let others run it, see it from a different angle. Tonight, I wanted to sit, to really see who was here." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with a weight that carried more than words. "And I saw you, Jacklin. You kept your head high, even when you were pushed down. That matters to me." Her hands tightened on the edge of the counter, her heart racing. She had been working doubles to cover rent, swallowing rude remarks to keep her job, believing no one ever noticed. Yet here he was, not only noticing but acknowledging her strength in the most unexpected way. The quiet of the diner wrapped around them as he slid the keys closer, his voice lowering. "This place needs people like you. People who treat it with respect. People who don't quit, even when it's hard." Jacklin's throat tightened, emotions swelling too strong to hide. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold it together as her world shifted in an instant. It wasn't just about surviving another shift anymore. This was a door opening, one she never thought she'd be standing in front of. The man gave her a faint smile, tipped his head, and added, "Don't think of me as the owner. Think of me as someone who believes in what you're capable of." With that, he turned toward the door, his footsteps slow but certain. Jacklin stood there, staring at the keys glinting under the diner lights, her chest tight, her mind racing. For the first time in a long while, she felt more than just a waitress taking orders. She felt seen, valued, and chosen. As the door closed behind him, the empty diner didn't feel so heavy anymore. It felt alive, filled with the weight of a moment she would carry forever.